So we put together an offer, and in the offer, we negotiated some concessions to cover some closing costs. This property needs a little bit of repairs, so we negotiated in some concessions to help cover that. Along with in the offer, we wrote the buyer agent compensation. There's a section on our contracts here in the state of Utah where we can negotiate compensation for a buyer's agent directly in the contract. So we wrote the offer and we sent it over. We got a counter offer the next day. In the Hey guys, it's Rod Moser, broker owner of Next Home Navigator here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I wanted to talk about today something that came up that I think is going to be a little bit of a hiccup for the next couple of months in regards to negotiations and buyer agent compensation. So there is a lot of confusion since the lawsuit and since the settlement in regards to paying a buyer's agent and what exactly is going to happen. So I wanted to take a second and talk about a scenario that came up today and a little bit of confusion in regards to how this has happened. So first of all, I had a buyer that I was working with, and we had determined before going out looking at any properties what my compensation for my services should be. And we came up with a number. Well, we went out and looked at several properties, and we decided to, well, my buyer decided to write an offer on one of the properties that we looked at. So we put together an offer, and in the offer, we negotiated some concessions to cover some closing costs. This property needs a little bit of repairs, so we negotiated in some concessions to help cover that. Along with in the offer, we wrote the buyer agent compensation. There's a section on our contracts here in the state of Utah where we can negotiate compensation for a buyer's agent directly in the contract. So we wrote the offer and we sent it over. We got a counter offer the next day. In the counter offer, they countered a few little items. They also counted some concessions, a little bit in concessions, and they also countered the compensation for me, for my compensation. Well, I called the agent and I said, "Hey, I think there's been a misunderstanding. First of all, a seller no longer gets to determine what my value is. See, in the past, sellers determined what they were willing to offer a buyer agent as far as compensation goes. Well, now they don't have a say in that negotiation. That's a contract that they're not privy to. In fact, across the MLS, we've removed the buyer agent compensation field. The seller no longer gets to negotiate that. So the agent said, "Hey, Rod, well, my seller is willing to pay X percent." And I said, "It's irrelevant and it doesn't matter. The way that you need to communicate this with your seller is that here's the offer that we got. And in the offer, this is what they're asking for. And here would be your net proceeds amount." That's the amount that they're really negotiating. So, what I asked the agent to do is to send me another counter, removing the compensation from that offer. That means if you need to offer less in concessions or raise the price, that's totally okay to do. What I don't want you to do is determine what my value is. That's already been determined in a contract apart from this contract. So, anyways, the reason that I asked that to be done is I don't want to have to go back to my buyer and renegotiate the fee that we've already determined was a fair fee because the seller is involving that in the negotiations. So, moving forward, what I'm encouraging you to do, if you are a real estate agent, stop negotiating the buyer agent compensation because you don't get to determine what my value is or what my fee should be. That's already been determined. So what you get to determine or what you get to negotiate is the price and the concessions. So if you need to cut the amount of concessions you were offering to make up for the difference that your client was expecting to pay in commissions or in compensation that they're no longer paying, or if you need to adjust the price to do that, that's totally okay. But please, moving forward, don't also negotiate what the buyer and the buyer's agent have already negotiated on their own to what they feel is a fair value. I would love to get your opinions on this. If you're a real estate agent looking at this, I'd love to get your opinions and open a dialogue. But the key fact is sellers no longer have a say in what a buyer's agent is worth and what that compensation should be. That's being handled in a contract between those two parties, and the seller doesn't get to determine that. The only thing the seller gets to determine is what am I paying my listing agent as their fee, and at the end of the day, what is my bottom line that I'm willing to accept for my house? Hope that makes sense, guys. Look forward to hearing your comments and your feedback. Talk to you soon.